Well, ladies and gents, happy Valentine's Day, and a brief apology up front. This was originally supposed to be a Comedy Dining Experience special for the film Tammy and the T-Rex, but unfortunately, the week that we were supposed to be recording the commentary for that, my partner contracted COVID and was basically housebound and we were unable to record. We rescheduled, and then the week we were supposed to reschedule for that, I got ill, and it's not COVID, but I'm not particularly great at the minute, so we've had to kind of put it on ice. So instead, I thought I'd show you guys something that never saw the light of day for the channel. Every so often we make pilot episodes for shows that we think will be a good idea to try, and sometimes they work and stick, and other times, for one reason or another, they just never see the light of day. So today I want to show you one of the pilot episodes that never developed. This is for a show that we planned called Short Film Showcase. It was planned in 2018, and the idea of it was basically to do a similar thing to what we did with full-length feature films, but with short films. So we'd take a short film, we'd contact the filmmaker, ask if they were okay for us to talk about their film, and then we'd talk about their short film and why you probably needed to see it. It was a really good idea, and at the time I was sort of working towards trying to make shorter form content to kind of complement the longer form content. Where we hit a roadblock was that after about 3 or 4 episodes being edited and produced out, it became quickly apparent that these actually required more editing than the normal episodes and were taking about as long as the normal reviews to put out. Which defeated the point of it being kind of a quick and easy way to kind of do short form reviews. So instead, around the same time, another show was in development called the Comedy Dining Experience, and that takes a lot less editing, is a lot more spontaneous and a lot easier to kind of manage, even though it's longer form content than my normal reviews. So Short Film Showcase sadly fell to the wayside, and the Comedy Dining Experience became a show that goes on the channel now. So this is just a glimpse into what might have been. You know, if the editing was a little bit easier, this could have been the show that came out instead of the Comedy Dining Experience. So here's one episode of it. We made 4, but this was the first one we finished. It's called Love at First Bite with Jeffrey Stalight, and take care. Love at First Bite with Jeffrey Stalight, love that title by the way, is a somewhat surreal comedy short that was made in 72 hours, produced by Harry Kemp. Released in 2018, this short is a blink and you'll miss it 1 minute and 30 seconds long. And yet what it crams into that 1 minute and 30 seconds is a wonderfully colourful experimental piece that plays around with many of the traditional elements of filmmaking. This short's style and tone are not too dissimilar from that of the early days of programming on Adult Swim. And I was pretty much on the money in that assumption. Having spoken to Kemp, he said his main influences when making this short were shows like Tim and Eric's Awesome Show and The Eric Andre Show. Though I thought comparisons could equally be drawn to the likes of Wonder Shows and maybe even some of the underground work of Tom Rubnitz. It's a very colourful and vibrant little short, with muted powder blues contrasting yellows, reds, golds and greens, that seem ever so slightly oversaturated and very visually appealing. The direction's whimsical in what it's trying to achieve, with Jeffrey being very relaxed as a character, but the direction offering an almost manic undercurrent to his performance. I found it to have elements of Sam Raimi and maybe just a tiny dash of Edgar Wright about it, both in terms of the range of the shots and how it's edited. But I think that really works for it here. Had the direction been slow or clinical, it may have ended up being a bit too plodding or weighted down within its own universe. So keeping it light and on its toes really helps push through what you're seeing. You're effectively expected to just roll with this one, but that superficial element definitely plays to its favour here. Mentioning that, there's lots of subtle things here that I think really work in this film's favour. Like the digital moves implemented throughout, which really amp up that sense of haste, or even more subtle visual cues. Like in the very beginning when Jeffrey tilts his chair up, the clouds disappear, almost implying that the reclined chair was floating. Even things like the CG play into this film's favour, with the love clouds not necessarily adding anything to the narrative, but just adding to the visually pleasing elements of this film. Matching the direction beat for beat, the cine is also quite impressive, with a good range of fast-paced, creative shots that on occasion border on the intrusive. There are wild swings from intense close-ups to wides that are transitioned effortlessly. I could also talk about the script, but honestly, all I can really say is that it serves its purpose. We're not looking at Citizen Kane or Ben-Hur here. This is 1 minute and 30 of ethereal, otherworldly popcorn. By the time you've processed it, it's well off into the distance. The dialogue is minimal, and I wouldn't say it was quotable, but it's pleasant, delivered in just the right tone and has just the right balance of flowery to narrative progressiveness. Whether this film has any hidden messages would be really hard to say. On the one hand, I suppose you could infer that this film is basically saying that love is an important component in anything that's enjoyable and meaningful, and that without it you'd experience something terrible. Though at the same time it could equally have just been created as a little bit of fun and a slice of surreal humour. That, I think, is actually the only criticism I can level at this film. There are periods where, for me, it straddles the line between being well-made post-ironic experimental surrealism and points where it just comes across as being lol random, lowest common denominator, crazy guy humour. The kind you see in adverts when they think they're being really quirky. Though to my mind, and having watched Kemp's other shorts in researching his style for this one, I'm inclined to believe he's mainly in the former camp with this. And that with a 72-hour deadline looming over him, there were moments where he just had to find something to pad a transition to get them from point A to point B. On the whole, I enjoyed this one. I know some people dislike this kind of comedy, but I find it refreshing when a filmmaker approaches this kind of thing with an understanding of how the craft works. And I think it works here. If Kemp ever decides to experiment further with this genre in future, I'll pretty much be there and waiting.